by Garuda, and he thereafter enters into the abode of the Supreme Lord to engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The narration of Kapila Deva and his mother, Devahuti, is so perfect and transcendental that even if one only hears or reads this description, he achieves the highest perfectional goal of life, for he engages in the loving service of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is no doubt that Devahuti, who had the Supreme Lord as her son and who followed the instructions of Kapila Deva, so nicely attained the highest perfection of human life. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the third canto, 32nd chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Activities of Kapila. If you look over there, you should see, I think you can see the next book. It's not there? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Thus end the Bhakti Vedanta's purports of the third canto, 33rd chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Activities of Kapila. So this is the end of the third canto. And now we're going to go to the next canto. So, okay, my dear devotees. So now we're going to go to the fourth canto, the beginning. There's an introduction that we're going to read. And then we'll begin the chapter 1. So the introduction says, this Bhagavata Purana is as brilliant as the sun and has arisen just after the departure of Lord Krishna to his own abode, accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc. Persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in the age of Kali shall get light from this Purana. And this is a statement from Srimad Bhagavatam 1.3.43. The timeless wisdom of India is expressed in the Vedas, ancient Sanskrit texts that touch upon all fields of human knowledge. Originally preserved through oral tradition, the Vedas were first put into writing 5,000 years ago by Srila Vyasadeva, the literary incarnation of God. After compiling the Vedas, Vyasadeva set forth their essence in the aphorisms known as Vedanta Sutras. Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita Purana, is Vyasadeva's commentary on his own Vedanta Sutras. It was written in the maturity of his spiritual life, under the direction of Narada Muni, his spiritual master. Referred to as the ripened fruit of the tree of Vedic literature, Srimad Bhagavatam is the most complete and authoritative exposition of Vedic knowledge. After compiling the Bhagavatam, Vyasa imparted the synopsis of that to his son, the sage Sukadeva Goswami. Sukadeva Goswami subsequently recited the entire Bhagavatam to Maharaj Parikshit in an assembly of learned saints on the bank of the Ganges at Hastinapura, now Delhi. Maharaj Parikshit was the emperor of the world and was a great Rajarsi, saintly king. Having received a warning that he would die within a week, he renounced his entire kingdom and retired to the bank of the Ganges to fast until death and receive spiritual enlightenment. The Bhagavatam begins with Emperor Parikshit's sober inquiry to Sukadeva Goswami. You are the spiritual master of great saints and devotees. I am therefore begging you to show the way of perfection for all persons, and especially for one who is about to die. Please let me know what a man should hear, chant, remember, and worship, and also what he should not do. Please explain all this to me. Sukadeva Goswami's answer to this question and numerous other questions posed by Maharaja Parikshit concerning everything from the nature of the self to the origin of the universe held the assembled sages in rapt attention continuously for the 7 days leading up to the king's death. The sage Sutta Goswami, who was present in that assembly when Sukadeva Goswami first recited Srimad Bhagavatam, later repeated the Bhagavatam before the gathering of sages in the forest of Naimisharanya. Those sages concerned about the spiritual welfare of the people in general had gathered to perform a long, continuous chain of sacrifices to counteract the degrading influence of the incipient age of Kali. Incipient means it's just beginning, I think. I'm going to look that word up. Incipient. In response to the sage's request that he speak the essence of Vedic wisdom, Sutta Goswami repeated from memory the entire 18,000 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam as spoken by Sukadeva Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's beginning to develop or exist.
Right, okay, yeah. The reader of Srimad Bhagavatam hears Sutta Goswami relate the questions of Maharaj Parikshit and the answers of Sukadeva Goswami. Also, Sutta Goswami sometimes responds directly to questions put by Sonaka Rishi, the spokesman for the sages gathered at Naimisharanya. One therefore simultaneously hears two dialogues, one between Maharaj Parikshit and Sukadeva Goswami on the bank of the Ganges, and another at Naimisharanya between Sutta Goswami and the sages at Naimisharanya forest, headed by Sonaka Rishi. Now, that's a very important statement. And it's good to know this because sometimes people get confused by hearing this uh, narration of the uh, two, um, let's say, um, two types of narration going on simultaneously. So it says, the reader of Srimad Bhagavatam hears Sutta Goswami relate the questions of Maharaj Parikshit, okay, and the answers of Sukadeva Goswami. Also, Sutta Goswami sometimes responds directly to questions put by Sonaka Rishi, the spokesman for the sages gathered at Naimisharanya. One therefore simultaneously hears two dialogues, one between Maharaj Parikshit and Sukadeva Goswami on the bank of the Ganges, and another at Naimisharanya between Sutta Goswami and sages at Naimisharanya forest, headed by Sonaka Rishi. Furthermore, while instructing the king, Parikshit, Sukadeva Goswami often relates historical episodes and gives accounts of lengthy philosophical discussions between such great souls as Narada Muni and Vasudeva. With this understanding of the history of the Bhagavatam, the reader will easily be able to follow its intermingling of dialogues and events from various sources. Since philosophical wisdom, not chronological order, is most important in the text, one need only be attentive to the subject matter of Srimad Bhagavatam to appreciate fully its profound message. Okay, so we have a special narration going on here. And there are basically, it says here, uh, there are two dialogues, one between Maharaj Parikshit and Sukadeva Goswami on the bank of the Ganges, and another at Naimisharanya between Sutta Goswami and the sages at Naimisharanya forest, headed by Sonaka Rishi. Okay, so we should not get confused. The translator of this edition, the translators of this edition, compare the Bhagavatam to sugar candy. Wherever you taste it, you will find it equally sweet and relishable. Therefore, to taste the sweetness of the Bhagavatam, one may begin by reading any of its volumes. After such an introductory taste, however, the serious reader is best advised to go back to the first canto and then proceed through the Bhagavatam, canto after canto, in its natural order. This edition of the Bhagavatam is the first complete English translation of this important text with an elaborate commentary, and it is the first widely available to English-speaking public. The first 12 volumes, Canto 1 through Canto 10, Part 1, are the products of the scholarly devotional effort of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness and the world's most distinguished teacher of Indian religious and philosophical thought. His consummate Sanskrit scholarship and intimate familiarity with the Vedic culture and thought, as well as the modern way of life, combine to reveal to the West a magnificent exposition of this important classic, this important classic. After the departure of Srila Prabhupada from this world in 1977, his monumental work of translating and annotating Srimad Bhagavatam has been continued by his disciples, Hridayananda Das Goswami and Gopi Parananda Dasa. Readers will find this work of value for many reasons. For those interested in the classical roots of Indian civilization, it serves as a vast reservoir of detailed information on virtually every one of its aspects. For students of comparative philosophy and religion, the Bhagavatam offers a penetrating view into the meaning of India's profound spiritual heritage. To sociologists and anthropologists, the Bhagavatam reveals the practical workings of a peaceful and scientifically organized Vedic culture, whose institutions were integrated on the basis of a highly developed spiritual worldview. Students of literature will discover the Bhagavatam to be a masterpiece of majestic poetry. For students of psychology, the text provides important perspectives on the nature of consciousness, human behavior, and a philosophical study of identity. Finally, to those seeking spiritual enlightenment, the Bhagavatam offers simple and practical guidance for attainment of the highest self-knowledge and realization of the absolute truth. The entire multi-volume text presented by the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust promises to occupy a significant place in the intellectual, cultural, and spiritual life of man for a long time to come. The publishers, Hare Krishna, that's the introduction to the fourth canto entitled The Creation of the Fourth Order. And we're going to begin with part 1, chapters 1-19. With the original Sanskrit text, its Roman transliteration, synonyms, translation, and elaborate reports by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Fourth canto, The Creation of the Fourth Order, part 1, chapter 1-19. With the original Sanskrit text, its Roman transliteration, synonyms, translation, and exclusive purports. And all this by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So, chapter 1, genealogical table of the daughters of Manu. Text number 1. Maitreya Uvacha, Manastu Satyarupayam, Tisra Kanyascha Judge Nire, Akutir Devahutischa Prasutir iti Vishruta. Sri Maitreya said, Swayambhuvamanu begot three daughters in his wife Satarupa, and their names were Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. First of all, let us offer our respectful obeisances unto our spiritual master, Om Vishnu Pada, Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada, by whose order I am engaged in this Herculean task. That means a very, very difficult task of writing commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam as the Bhakti Vedanta purports. By His grace, we have finished 3 cantos already, and we are just trying to begin on the 4th canto. By His divine grace, let us offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Chaitanya, who began this Krishna consciousness movement of Bhagavata Dharma 500 years ago. And through his grace, let us offer our obeisances to the 6 Goswamis, and then let us offer our obeisances to Radha and Krishna, the spiritual couple who enjoy eternally in Vrindavan with their cowherd boys and damsels in Rajabhumi. Let us also offer our respectful obeisances to all the devotees and eternal servitors of the Supreme Lord. In this 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there are 31 chapters, and all these chapters describe the secondary creation by Brahma and the Manus. The Supreme Lord himself does the real creation by agitating his material energy, and then by his order, Brahma, the first living creature in the universe, attempts to create the different planetary systems and their inhabitants, expanding the population through his progeny, like Manu and other progenitors of living entities. Who work perpetually under the order of the Supreme Lord. In the first chapter of this 4th canto, there are descriptions of the 3 daughters of Swayambhuva Manu and their descendants. The next 6 chapters describe the sacrifice performed by King Daksha and how it was spoiled. Thereafter, the activities of Maharaj Dhruva are described in 5 chapters. Then, in 11 chapters, the activities of King Prithu are described, and the next 8 chapters are devoted to the activities of the Pracheta kings. As described in the first verse of this chapter, Swayambhuva Manu had 3 daughters named Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti. Of these 3 daughters, one daughter, Devahuti, has already been described along with her husband, Kardama Muni, and her son, Kapila Muni. In this chapter, the descendants of the first daughter, Akuti, will specifically be described. Swayambhuva Manu was the son of Brahma. Brahma had many other sons, but Manu's name is specifically mentioned first because he was a great devotee of the Lord. In this verse, there is also the word cha, indicating that besides the 3 daughters mentioned, Swayambhuva Manu also had 2 sons. Text number 2. Akuti had 2 brothers, but in spite of her brothers, King Swayambhuva Manu handed her over to Prajapati Ruchi on the condition that the son born of her be returned to Manu as his son. This he did in consultation with his wife Satarupa. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Sometimes a sonless person offers his daughter to a husband on the condition that his grandson be returned to him to be adopted as his son and inherit his body. This is called,
Property.
huh?
His property.
I'm sorry, and inherit his property. I'm sorry. This is called putrika dharma, which means that by execution of religious rituals, one gets a son, although one is sonless by one's own wife. But here we see extraordinary behavior in Manu, for in spite of his having two sons, he handed over his first daughter to Prajapati Ruchi on the condition that the son born of his daughter be returned to him as his son. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura comments in this connection that King Manu knew that the Supreme Personality of Godhead would take birth in the womb of Akuti. Therefore, in spite of having two sons, he wanted the particular son born of Akuti, because he was ambitious to have the Supreme Personality of Godhead appear as his son and grandson. Manu is the lawgiver of mankind, and since he personally executed the Putrika Dharma, we may accept that such a system may be adopted by mankind also. Thus, even though one has a son, if one wants to have a particular son from one's daughter, one may give one's daughter in charity on that condition. That is the opinion of Srila Jiva Goswami. Text 3. Ruchi, who was very powerful in his Brahminical qualifications and was appointed one of the progenitors of the living entities, begot one son and one daughter by his wife Akuti. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The word Brahma Varchasvi is very significant. Ruchi was a Brahmana, and he executed the Brahminical duties very rigidly. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, the Brahminical qualifications are control of the senses, control of the mind, cleanliness within and without, development of spiritual and material knowledge, within and without, department of spiritual and material knowledge, simplicity, truthfulness, faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, etc. There are many qualities which indicate a Brahminical personality, and it is understood that Ruchi followed all the Brahminical principles rigidly. Therefore, he is specifically mentioned as Brahma Varchasvi, one who's born of a Brahmana family, of a Brahmana father, but does not act as a Brahmana, is called in Vedic language a Brahma Bandhu, and is calculated to be on the level of Sudras and women. Thus, in the Bhagavatam, we find that Mahabharata was specifically compiled by Vyasadeva for Stri Sudra Brahma Bandhu. Stri means women. Sudra means the lower class of civilized human society. And Brahma Bandhu means persons who are born in the families of Brahmanas, but do not follow the rules and regulations carefully. All of these three classes are called less intelligent. They have no access to the study of the Vedas, which are specifically meant for persons who have acquired the Brahminical qualifications. This restriction is based not upon any sectarian distinction, but upon qualification. The Vedic literatures cannot be understood unless one has developed the Brahminical qualifications. It is regrettable, therefore, that persons who have no Brahminical qualifications and have never been trained under a bona fide spiritual master nevertheless comment on Vedic literatures like the Srimad Bhagavatam and other Puranas. For such persons cannot deliver their real message. Ruchi was considered a first-class Brahmana. Therefore, he is mentioned several mentioned here as Brahma Varchasvi, one who has had full prowess in Brahminical strength. Okay, text 4. Of the two children born of Akuti, the male child was directly an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and his name was Yagya, which is another name of Lord Vishnu. The female child was a partial incarnation of Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, the eternal consort of Lord Vishnu. Purport by Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, is the eternal consort of Lord Vishnu. Here it is stated that both the Lord and Lakshmi, who are eternal consorts, appeared from Akuti simultaneously. Both the Lord and his consort are beyond the material creation, as confirmed by many authorities. Narayana Paro Vyaktat. Therefore, their eternal relationship cannot be changed, and Yagya, the boy born of Akuti, later married the goddess of fortune. Text number 5. The 12. Okay. What text number 5? 1 second. Swayambhuva Manu very gladly brought home the beautiful boy named Yagya, and Ruchi, his son-in-law, kept with him the daughter Dakshina. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Swayambhuva Manu was very glad to see that his daughter Akuti had given birth to both a boy and girl. He was afraid that he would take one son and that because of this, his son-in-law, Ruchi, might be sorry. Thus, when he heard that a daughter was born along with the boy, he was very glad. Ruchi, according to his promise, returned his male child to Swayambhuva Manu and decided to keep the daughter, whose name was Dakshina. One of Lord Vishnu's names is Yagya because he is the master of the Vedas. The name Yagya comes from the Yajusampati, which means Lord of all sacrifices. In the Yajur Veda, there are different ritualistic prescriptions for performing yagyas, and the beneficiary of all such yagyas is the Supreme Lord Vishnu. Therefore, it is stated in Bhagavad Gita 3.9, Yajnar Tat Karmana. One should act, but one should perform one's prescribed duties only for the sake of Yagya or Vishnu. If one does not act for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or if one does not perform the spiritual devotional service, then there will be reactions to all one's activities. It does not matter if the reaction is good or bad, if our activities are not dovetailed with the desire of the Supreme Lord, or if we do not act in Krishna consciousness, then we shall be responsible for the results of all our activities. There is always a reaction to every kind of action. But if actions are performed for yajna, there is no reaction. Thus, if one acts for yajna or the Supreme Personality Godhead, one is not entangled in the material condition, for it is mentioned in the Vedas and also in Bhagavad Gita that the Vedas and the Vedic rituals are meant for understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. From the very beginning, one should try to act in Krishna consciousness. That will free one from the reactions of material activities. Text number 6. The Lord of the ritualistic performance of yajna later married Dakshina, who was anxious to have the personality of Godhead as her husband. And in this wife, the Lord was also very much pleased to beget 12 children. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. An ideal husband and wife are generally called Lakshmi Narayana, to compare them to the Lord and the goddess of fortune. For it is significant that Lakshmi Narayana are forever happy as husband and wife. A wife should always remain satisfied with her husband, and a husband should always remain satisfied with his wife. In the Chandakya Sloka, the moral instructions of Chanakya Pandit, it is said that if a husband and wife are always satisfied with one another, then the goddess of fortune automatically comes. In other words, where there is no disagreement between husband and wife, all material opulence is present, and good children are born. Generally, according to Vedic civilization, the wife is trained to be satisfied in all conditions. And the husband, according to Vedic instruction, is required to please the wife with sufficient food, ornaments, and clothing. Then, if they are satisfied with their mutual, peaceful, but unfortunate, then if they are satisfied with their mutual dealings, good children are born. In this way, the entire world can become peaceful. But unfortunately, in this age of Kali, there are no ideal husbands and wives. Therefore, unwanted children are produced, and no peace and prosperity in the present day world. And there is no peace and prosperity in the present day world. Well, there's a saying, woe is me to be born in this age. Text number 7. The 12 boys born of Yajna and Dakshina were named Tosa, Protosa, Santosa, Bhadra, Shanti, Idaspati, Idhima, Kavi, Vibhu, Swana, Sudeva, and Rochana. Text number 8. During the time of Swayambhuva Manu, these sons all became the demigods collectively named the Tusitas. Marichi became the head of the 7 rishis, and Yajna became the king of the demigods, Indra. During the lifetime of Swayambhuva Manu, 6 kinds of living entities were generated from the demigods known as the Tusitas. from the sages headed by Marichi, and from descendants of Yajna, king of the demigods, and of their expanded, all of them expanded their progeny to observe the order of the Lord, to fill the universe with living entities. These six kinds of living entities are known as Manus, Devas, Manuputras, Amsavataras, Sureshwaras, and Rishis. Yagya, being the incarnation of the Supreme Personality Godhead, became the leader of the demigods, Indra. Text number 9. Swayambhuva Manu's two sons, Priyavrata and Uttanapada, became very powerful kings, and their sons and grandsons spread all over the three worlds during that period. Text 10. My dear son, Swayambhuva Manu, my dear son, Swayambhuva Manu handed over his very dear daughter, Devahuti, to Kardama Muni. I have already spoken to you about them, and you have heard about them almost in full. Text 11. Swayambhuva Manu handed over his daughter, Prasuti, to the son of Brahma named Daksha, who was also one of the progenitors of the living entities. The descendants of Daksha are spread throughout the three worlds. Text number 12. You have already been informed about the 9 daughters of Kardama Muni, who were handed over to 9 different sages. I shall now describe the descendants of those 9 daughters. Please hear from me. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The third canto has already described how Kardama Muni begot 9 daughters in Devahuti, and how all the daughters were later handed over to great sages like Marichi, Atri, and Vasistha. Text 13. Kardama Muni's daughter, Kala, who was married to Marichi, gave birth to 2 children, whose names were Kashyapa and Purnima. Their descendants all spread all over the world. Text 14. My dear Vidura, of the 2 sons, Kashyapa and Purnima, Purnima begot 3 children, namely Viraja, Visvaga, and Devakulya. Of these 3, Devakulya was the water which washed the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, and which later on transformed into the Ganges of the heavenly planets. Wow, Haribol. Purport. Of the 2 sons, Kashyapa and Purnima, herein, Purmina's descendants are described. And Lord can, and an elaborate description of these descendants will be given in the 6th canto. It is also understood herein that Deva Kulya is the presiding deity of the river Ganges, which comes down from the heavenly planets to this planet and is accepted to be sanctified because it touches the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari. Text 15. Okay, I have to go through a whole bunch of very nice paintings and pictures of great personalities that are spoken of in this section of the Bhagavatam. Okay, so now we are on text number 15. And it says, Anasuya, the wife of Atri Muni, gave birth to three very famous sons, Soma, Dattatreya, and Durvasa, who were partial representations of Lord Vishnu, Lord Shiva, and Lord Brahma. Soma was a partial representative of Lord Brahma. Dattatreya was a partial representation of Lord Vishnu, and Durvasa was a partial representation of Lord Nikula. I'm sorry. Soma was a partial representation of Lord Brahma. Dattatreya was a partial representation of Lord Vishnu, and Durvasa was a partial representation of Lord Shiva. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In this verse, we find the words Atma Isha Brahma Sambhavam. Atma means the super soul or Vishnu. Isha means Lord Shiva, and Brahma means the four-headed Lord Brahma. The three sons born of Anasuya, Dattatreya, Durvasa, and Soma were born as partial representations of these three demigods. Atma is not in the category of the demigods or living entities because he is Vishnu. Therefore, he is described as Vibhinamsa Bhutanam. The Supersoul, Vishnu, is the seed-giving father of all living entities, including Brahma and Lord Shiva. Another meaning of the word Atma may be accepted in this way. The principle, who is the Supersoul in every Atma, or one may say the soul of everyone, became manifested as Dattatreya because the word Amsa, part and parcel, is used here. In Bhagavad Gita, the individual souls are also described as parts of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or Super Soul. So why not accept that Dattatreya was one of those parts? Well, this is a question mark. Why not accept that Dattatreya was one of those parts? Now, the answer. Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma are also described here as parts. So why not accept all of them as ordinary individual souls? The answer is that the manifestations of Mahavishnu and those of the ordinary living entities are certainly all parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, and no one is equal to him. But among the parts and parcels, there are different categories. In the Varaha Purana, it is nicely explained that some of the parts are Swamsa and some are Vibhinamsa. Vibhinamsa parts are called Jivas, and the Swamsa parts are in the Vishnu category. In the Jiva category, the Vibhinamsa parts and parcels, there are also gradations. That is explained in the Vishnu Purana, where it is clearly stated that the individual parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord are subject to being covered by the external energy called illusion or Maya. Such individual parts and parcels who can travel to any part of the Lord's creation are called Sarvagata and are suffering the pangs of material existence. They are proportionately freed from the coverings of ignorance under material existence according to different levels of work and under different influences of the modes of material nature. For example, the sufferings of jivas situated in the mode of goodness are less than those of jivas situated in the mode of ignorance. Pure Krishna consciousness, however, is the birthright of all living entities, because every living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. The consciousness of the Lord is also is also in the part and parcel, and according to the proportion to which that consciousness is cleared of material dirt, the living entities are differently situated. In the Vedanta Sutra, the living entities of different gradations are compared to candles or lamps with different candle power. For example, some electric bulbs have the power of 1,000 candles. Some have the power of 500 candles, and some the power of 100 candles, some 50 candles, etc. But all electric bulbs have light. Light is present in every bulb, but the gradations of light are different. Similarly, there are gradations of Brahman, gradations of light are different.
No.
I'm sorry. Light is present in every bulb, but the gradations of light are different. Similarly, there are gradations of Brahman, the Vishnu Swamsa expansions of the Supreme Lord in different Vishnu forms are like lamps. Lord Shiva is also like a lamp, and the supreme candle power, or the 100% light, is Krishna. The Vishnu Tattva has 94%. The Shiva Tattva has 84%. Lord Brahma has 78%. And the living entities are also like Brahma, but in the conditioned state, their power is still more dim. There are gradations of Brahman, and no one can deny this fact. Therefore, the words Atmesha Brahma Sambhavan indicate that Dattatreya was directly part and parcel of Vishnu, whereas Durvasa and Soma were parts and parcels of Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. Text number 16. After hearing this, Vidura inquired from Maitreya, my dear master, how is it that the three deities, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, who are the creator, maintainer, and destroyer of the whole creation, became the offspring of the wife of Atri Muni? Purport. The inquisitiveness of Vidura was quite fitting, for he understood that when the Supersoul, Lord Brahma, and Lord Shiva all appeared through the person of Anasuya, the wife of Atri Muni, there must have been some great purpose. Otherwise, why should they have appeared in such a way? Text 17. Maitreya said, when Lord Brahma ordered Atri Muni to create generations after marrying Anasuya, Atri Muni and his wife went to perform severe austerities in the valley of the mountain known as Riksha. Text 18. In that mountain valley flows a river named Nirvindiya. On the bank of the river are many asoka trees and other plants full of palasa flowers, and there is always the sweet sound of water flowing from a waterfall. The husband and wife reached that beautiful place. There, the great sage concentrated his mind by the yogic breathing exercises, and thereby controlling all attachment. He remained standing on one leg only, eating nothing but air, and stood there on one leg for 100 years. He was thinking, may the Lord of the universe, of whom I have taken shelter, kindly be pleased to offer me a son exactly like him. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It appears that the great sage Atri Muni had no specific idea of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Of course, he must have been conversant with the Vedic information that there is a Supreme Personality of Godhead who is the creator of the universe, from whom everything emanated, who maintains this created manifestation, and in whom the entire manifestation is conserved after dissolution. Yatova imani bhutani, Taittiriya Upanishad 3.1.1. The Vedic mantra, the Vedic mantras give us information of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Atri Muni concentrated his mind upon that Supreme Personality of Godhead, even without knowing his name, just to beg from him a child exactly on his level. This kind of devotional service, in which the knowledge of God's name is lacking, is also described in Bhagavad Gita, where the Lord says that the four kinds of men with backgrounds of pious activities come to him asking for what they need. Atri Muni wanted a son exactly like the Lord, and therefore he is not supposed to have been a pure devotee, because he had a desire to be fulfilled. And that desire was material. Although he wanted a son exactly like the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this desire was material because he did not want the personality of Godhead himself, but only a child exactly like him. If he had desired the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a child, he would have been completely free of material desires, because he would have wanted the Supreme Absolute Truth. But because he wanted a similar child, his desire was material. Thus, Atri Muni cannot be counted among the pure devotees. Okay, I think we'll stop right there and continue tomorrow. Are there any questions? We covered a lot of verses. It's very interesting to see how even very exalted personalities can make mistakes. And so it is a rare thing to encounter a genuinely pure devotee. That's a fact. And we're seeing it now, even though the people that we're hearing about are very highly, you know, let's say, evolved personalities, but still, they can make a mistake, just like it says that Atri Muni wanted a son exactly like the Lord, and therefore he is not supposed to have been a pure devotee, because he had a desire to be fulfilled, and that desire was material. Although he wanted a son exactly like the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this desire was material because he did not want the personality of Godhead himself, but only a child exactly like him. If he had desired the Supreme Personality of Godhead as his child, he would have been completely free of material desires, because he would have wanted the Supreme Absolute Truth. But because he wanted a similar child, his desire was material. Thus, Atri Muni cannot be counted among the pure devotees. Yeah, so we should learn from this, let's say, history of Atri Muni, that our real purpose should be to want the Supreme Personality of Godhead. and not a similar, not a and not um, a similitude of the personality of Godhead. So to have that type of clear understanding is rare. So even a great personality as Atri Muni can make a mistake. He wanted a son exactly like the Lord, and therefore he is not supposed to have been a pure devotee because he had a desire to be fulfilled, and that desire was material. Although he wanted a son exactly like the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this desire was material because he did not want the personality of Godhead himself, but only a child exactly like him. If he had desired the Supreme Personality of Godhead as his child, he would have been completely free of material desires because he would have wanted the Supreme Absolute Truth. But because he wanted a similar child, his desire was material. Thus, Atri Muni cannot be counted among pure devotees. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, we'll read. I think our time is over, but we'll read one more verse, text 21. While Atri Muni was engaged in these severe austerities, a blazing fire came out of his head by virtue of his breathing exercise. And that fire was seen by the three principal deities of the three worlds. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the fire of pranayama is mental satisfaction. That fire was perceived by the Supersoul Vishnu, and thereby Lord Brahma and Shiva also perceived it. Atri Muni, by his breathing exercise, concentrated on the Supersoul or the Lord of the universe, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. The Lord of the universe is Vasudeva. Vasudeva Sarvam Iti. And by the direction of Vasudeva, Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva work. Therefore, on the direction of Vasudeva, both Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva perceived the severe penance adopted by Atri Muni, and thus they were pleased to come down, as stated in the next verse, text 22. At that time, the three deities approached the hermitage of Atri Muni, accompanied by the denizens of the heavenly planets, such as the celestial beauties, the Gandharvas, the Siddhas, and the Vidyadharas, and the Nagas. Thus they entered the ashrama of the great sage who had become famous by his austerities. It is advised, purport by Srila Prabhupada, it is advised in the Vedic literatures that one should take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the Lord of the universe and the master of creation, maintenance, and dissolution. He is known as the Supersoul. And when one worships the Supersoul, all other duties, such as all other deities, such as Brahma and Shiva, appear with Lord Vishnu, because they are directed by the supreme, by the Supersoul. Text 23. The sage was standing on one leg, but as soon as he saw that the three deities had appeared before him, he was so pleased to see them all together that despite great difficulty, he approached them on one leg. Thereafter, he began to offer prayers to the three deities who were seated on different carriers, a bull, a swan, and Garuda, and who held on their hands a drum, kusa grass, and a discus. The sage offered them his respects by falling down like a stick. Purport. Danda means a long rod, and vat means like. Before a superior, one has to fall down on the ground just like a stick. And this sort of offering of respect is called dandavat. Atri Rishi offered his respect to the three deities in that way. They were identified by their different carriers and different symbolic representations. In that connection, it is stated here that Lord Vishnu was sitting on Garuda, a big aquiline bird, and was carrying in his hand a disc. Brahma was sitting on a swan and had in his hand kusa grass. And Lord Shiva was sitting on a bull and carrying in his hand a small drum called a damaru. Atri Rishi recognized them by their symbolic representations and different carriers, and thus he offered them prayers and respects. So let's look up the word aquiline, Aquiline, a big aquiline bird. I'm not exactly sure what that word aquiline means. Aquiline.
It says of a person's nose.
What?
It says hooked or curved like an eagle's beak.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Yeah, he's got a hook type of nose.
Or curved.
A nose or a beak? It's the beak.
Beak.
Yeah.
Inside it says of a person's nose, but it says hooked or curved like an eagle's beak.
Okay. All right. All right. We'll just read one more verse. Text 25. Atrimuni was greatly pleased to see that the three devas were gracious towards him. His eyes were dazzled by the effulgence of their bodies. And therefore he closed his eyes for the time being. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Since the deities were smiling, he could understand that they were pleased with him. Their glaring bodily effulgence was intolerable to his eyes, so he closed them for the time being. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. I think we'll stop there and continue tomorrow. Are there any questions? We read a lot of verses today.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I had a question.
Yes, Hare Krishna.
Dandavat pranams, first of all, to the beautiful class. Thank you, Maharaj. Maharaj, I just had a quick question. We all have goals, and goals are usually, unfortunately, material. How do we make sure those material goals don't become our desires? Because here we saw such an exalted personality who had a material desire, kind of fall down. So, how do we make sure our goals don't end up becoming desires?
By having a spiritual master that you can ask a
Okay.
question to and get, let's say, direction, correct direction, so that you don't make that mistake. So the spiritual master, a bona fide spiritual master, can recognize if you have a material desire or a spiritual desire. Sometimes it's hard to understand the difference between the two. That's why having a bona fide spiritual master is very good, so that you don't make any mistakes.
Thank you, Maharaj.
You're welcome. Hare Krishna.
Hare
All,
Krishna.
all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah.
I have one question on this 20th text.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
So, Maharaj, in this example, the Atri Muni, he's a is it a right understanding that Atri Muni is a devotee but not a pure devotee? Because he is still surrendered to the Lord, but with a material desire. So he's still a devotee but having material.
Well, his problem was that he wanted a son like the Supreme Lord. That means that he was not a pure devotee. If he wanted the Lord himself, that means that he'd be a pure devotee.
Right. But he's going to the Lord for a material desire.
Well, yeah, and basically it says here, it appears that the great sage Atri Muni had no specific idea of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Of course, he must have been conversant with Vedic information that there is a Supreme Personality of Godhead who is the creator of the universe, from whom everything emanated, who maintains this created manifestation, and in whom the entire manifestation is conserved after dissolution. Yatova Imani Bhutani, Taittiriya Upanishad 3.1.1. The Vedic mantras give us information of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Atri Muni concentrated his mind upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even without knowing his name, just to beg from him a child exactly on his, meaning Krishna's, level. This kind of devotional service, in which the knowledge of God's name is lacking, is also described in Bhagavad Gita, where the Lord says that 4 kinds of men have backgrounds of pious activities, come to him asking for what they need. Atri Muni wanted a son exactly like the Lord, and therefore he is not supposed to have been a pure devotee, because he had a desire to be fulfilled, and that desire was material. Although he wanted a son exactly like the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his desire was material because he did not want the personality of Godhead himself, but only a child exactly like him. If he had desired the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a child, he would have been completely free of material desires because he would have wanted the Supreme Absolute Truth. But because he wanted a similar child, his desire was material. Thus, Atri Muni cannot be counted among the pure devotees. Wow. Very interesting. So, we have to be very careful. That's why one should regularly read the Srimad Bhagavatam every day, and more than once a day, several times a day, so that we will not be misled by mistaken desires. Our only desire should be to serve the Lord with love and devotion. So that's not an easy thing, to have pure love and pure devotion. So it requires the help of bona fide spiritual masters also, so we don't deviate and make mistakes. Therefore, it says here, thus Atri Muni cannot be counted among the pure devotees. And why is that? Well, he wanted a child like the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he didn't want the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's why it says here, if he had desired the Supreme Personality of Godhead as his child, he would have been completely free of material desires because he would have wanted the supreme absolute truth. But because he wanted a similar child, his desire was material. Thus, Atri Muni cannot be counted among the pure devotees. Haribol, my dear devotees, you see how we have to be extremely careful and circumspect and always have the direction and validation of pure devotees. And before we embark on a certain, let's say, endeavor, we should get the validation of pure devotee. Okay, thank you very much. It is almost 8 o'clock. Are there any questions before we close this section of the history here? Any questions?
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj and then
Yes.
So all glories to Srila Prabhupada. So it means that we can have, for every desire, we should strive to have Krishna as our goal for any desire. At least strive, right? Because when it has gone to the level that even the child, we can, so basically we have to serve Krishna in like all the like in these rasa, like whenever we are doing any service, let's say, I mean, you have always said that, let's say we are cooking food, we have to think that, I mean, we have to always cook for the Lord. So when we are doing services, so we have whatever service we are doing, let's say we are doing service or doing anything for the child, so we have to think it's for Krishna. How does that, can you kindly clarify? Basically, we can't have any other goal or desire. It has to be just Krishna goal. Very targeted.
Well, before you feed the child, you should make an offering to the Lord so that the child is receiving the mercy of the Lord. So then someone will say, well, what if mother is breastfeeding? How can we make that offering? Well, you can make that offering mentally. The mother can first mentally offer her breast food, in other words, her breast milk, to the Lord, and then feed the child. So whatever we do, it should be purified by offering it first to the Lord and then asking for his mercy in the form of prasadam. Even breastfeeding should be first offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and then offered to the child. Because we should not give anything without it being sanctified by Krishna. Now, there are different ways of, let's say, making an offering. So a mother who's going to breastfeed her child, she should pray before that, and to purify her endeavor by wanting to by offering her breast feed first to Krishna and then offering it to the child. So like most when they just, breastfeed the child. But even in breastfeeding, one should first offer it to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of God, and then breastfeed the child.
Thank you so much, Guru Maharaj. So everything we are doing, we should just offer it to the Lord and then do it, so the desires will become, all the desires, everything we are doing will become spiritual. And that's what Muslims do. They pray 5 times a day. So if a devout Muslim is praying 5 times a day, yes, and Srila Prabhupada, I don't know, he used to say that you should, if you can't do 16 rounds at one time, you should do it 4 times, break it 4 times. But during the day, it's very difficult unless we do it in the morning. So everything we are doing, if we start offering to the Lord, so by automatically we'll remember Lord that many times. Thank you so much.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, so we'll stop right there and think very deeply about what we heard today. And our takeaway is, although Atri Muni wanted a son exactly like the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his desire was material because he did not want the personality of Godhead himself, but only a child exactly like him. If he had desired the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a child, he would have been completely free of material desires because he would have wanted the Supreme Absolute Truth. But because he wanted a similar child, his desire was material. Thus, Atri Muni cannot be counted among the pure devotees. Wow, what a nice, let's say, discrimination. And Prabhupada is explaining so that we don't make a mistake like Atri Muni. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. That's why it's important to read Srimad Bhagavatam with the purports of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, so we don't make any mistakes. It's very, very easy to make mistakes without the, let's say, purports of Srila Prabhupada. So people only read purports and don't read only read the verses and not the purports. They can make many mistakes in their spiritual life. Hare Krishna.